In the last video, we looked at how to find a variety, query a variety, and compare varieties. This time, let's go ahead and look at analytics. So again, we're going to select corn as our product, and this will bring us to the dashboard for corn. And we are going to come up here to this button on the far right called Analytics. So let's jump into Analytics. By default, Analytics is going to load the latest trial year, so 2021, and it's going to pull in yield data for you initially, but you can add any additional data fields that you want. So let's go ahead and add those additional data fields. So I'm going to come up here to where it says yield, and I'm going to click on that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to select percent lodging, and let's go ahead and select test weight as well. Now, once I've selected these additional data fields, I need to rebuild my analytics. So we're going to come down here and click on Rebuild Analytics, fetch that data, let the analytics rebuild, and now I've got my data in front of me. So this is probably something you're used to looking at, yield tables, but this is now yield tables where all of the data is together for multiple locations as well as multiple years if needed. So what we're looking at here now is you have all of your varieties that were trialed anywhere in the Maryland system in 2021, all listed over here on the left. In your headers here at the top, you have each one of the trial locations. And then here you have the total 2021 average for each trial location group. If there were multiple groups, you would have multiple values here, but in this particular case, there's only the one, so that's why the group average matches the total statewide average. And then the same applies here for your multi-year average. By default, it will default to 3 years of average data pulled in if that is available, and you can modify that, and I can show you that in a minute. To give you some indication as to what you're looking at over here while we're in the 3-year multi-year columns, there's going to be a Y value and you're going to see an L value. The Y value is telling you the number of years of data represented in the average that you're looking at, and the L value tells you the number of locations. So in this particular case, Y being 1, there's only 1 year's worth of data for this variety, but there are 5 locations, and you can see those 5 locations over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So when you look at the next entry down, there are 3 years worth of data and 15 locations. That tells you that this variety has been trialed in the previous 2 years as well as the current year, and it was in all 5 locations for all 3 of those years, giving you a total of 15 locations and 3 years worth of data represented in this average that you're looking at here. So looking at multi-year data, obviously the more years that you can include in that data, the more believable or relevant that average becomes. And that's why we give you an indication of how much data is available in determining that average. So let's go ahead and look at some of the things that we can do here within analytics and understand more of what we're looking at. So you can click on any one of these headers. So let's say that you are in the Clarksville area and you wanted to sort or rank your varieties by yield in the Clarksville area. You can just go ahead and click on that and it will sort that. Now what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the highest yielding variety at the top, and we descend all the way to the lowest yielding variety at the bottom. Anytime you see a cell that is highlighted in red, this is the minimum value for that trial. And anytime you see a value highlighted in this green, it is the maximum value in that trial. And then you'll see the blue shading is anytime that a value is above average, meaning that it is greater than 1 standard deviation off the mean. And it is a gradient highlighting, so the further away from the mean you are, the darker the blue, the closer you get, the lighter the blue. And we can see in this particular case, we actually had a value hit the average. Then your yellow is anything that is below average. So it's an easy way to be able to look across a particular variety as it was trialed in many locations and see how its performance occurred within the trial that it was in, by just being able to look at colors to help give you an indication of positive and negative performance in a variety. So that's great if you're just looking at yield information, and we can do the same here. Again, we can sort by our multi-year average, and we can see how that ranks. And what's interesting is a lot of your year one stuff here pops up at the top. But you don't just want to find out how a variety performs based on yield, right? We pulled in lodging, we pulled in test weight. So we want to see a variety's performance by these other characteristics as well. So I'm going to go back to sorting by Clarksville, and I'm going to now jump over to lodging. Now, one of the things you're going to see here when I jump over to lodging is there's this little -1 here. And what does that mean? A -1 means that this data field has been inverted. And inverted meaning that a higher value in lodging is not a good thing. You want a lower value in lodging. So hence then we flip the colors for you, that your green indicators are the ones that are the minimum value, and your red is the maximum value, and your above and below average accordingly here. So you can sort by that. And then lastly, we have test weight, and we'll sort this one as well. And so you can get a ranking by test weight. So now you've probably walked through this and you're thinking, okay, I got a ranking by my yield, a ranking by my lodging percentage, a ranking by my test weight. But the varieties that were at the top of the list are changing, and how do I keep track of where varieties are going? And that's the trouble that you have in an old paper system. What we're able to do here in Medius.Re with analytics is we use this total score averages to help you then correlate a variety's performance across the multiple data fields that you have selected by using standard deviation and what are known as z-scores. We're able to generate a ranking score for a variety's performance across the fields that you've selected. So based on yield, lodging percentage, and test weight, we now have sorted here for Clarksville our variety's performance by the best performance to the lowest performing variety. If you're interested in giving more weight to yield than to some of these other characteristics, that's not a problem. You can come up here to adjust data field weight and click on that. And by default, they're all weighted evenly. And we can increase this weight to be whatever we would want it to be. But let's say we want yield to have 2 times the factor and lodging and test weight being equal. Then we can increase that to 2, 1, and 1. And you'll notice as I did that my ranking order slightly shifted as varieties then were recalculated. So you have that flexibility for weighting. The other thing you might say is, well, okay, there's a lot of yield 1s in here, and I don't really know enough information about a year 1 variety, so I want to filter out by where varieties are greater than 2 years. I'm looking for multi-years. So we're going to come up here to filters, and you can filter by any one of these things, or you can come in here and you can say select any one of these data fields to be able to filter by. But we're going to go all the way down to number of trial years. And I'm going to say I want the number of trial years to be greater than or equal to 2, meaning that I have at least 2 trial years worth of data. And then I hit filter, and you'll see that my data has now been pared down. And now what I'm looking at is data where I only have year 3, year 2 varieties. So I'm looking at varieties that are relevant for multi-year data. Again, like in other views that you have within Medius.Re, there's opportunities for sharing, for downloading, and for capturing. So if I wanted to share this, I could come up and click on copy link. This will generate a link for me that when I send it to someone, we'll see these 3 data fields selected and this filter applied so that they can look at data exactly as I'm looking at data. A great way to share information with other people. The other thing you do is you could export this to Excel, download the data that you're currently looking at to be able to use that in any external analysis that you want to do, or you can save analytics as an image, which would generate essentially a screenshot of this to allow you to put it in a presentation or a Word document that you might need. The last thing over here on the far right, these settings, give you the ability to modify the view that you're looking at. So if you wanted to change your multi-year average that we were looking at, you could adjust that here to anything that you want. You can turn on the ability to see ranges, to see your z-score. You can even look at, if I go back to yield here, I could say, instead of looking at the current year's value for this particular column, I could change that to a multi-year value. So now I'm seeing a multi-year performance by a specific location, not necessarily by the entire region or the entire state. Or you can look at only the current year only. You can turn off the gradient if you can turn off colors if colors aren't something that are of interest to you. You have full flexibility there. And then again, explanation for what the colors mean and how standard deviation is calculated down there for you. So the last piece to analytics, and what I think makes this really beneficial, is you've now taken all of this data from multiple locations over multiple years and pared it down to a select few that seem to bubble to the top. And I can go ahead and I can click anywhere here in this row, and I'm just going to select these top 5 right here and say, okay, I'm interested in knowing more about these particular varieties. So once I have these 5 varieties selected, I can come up here to compare selected varieties. What this is going to do is it takes me to the compare page that, if you saw the previous video, you're familiar with. But it now took all of those varieties that we weren't sure how we wanted to pare things down, and has now brought us to this final view of being able to look at more detail of those varieties. And if you want to know more information about how to use compare varieties, you can look at the previous video that is available in your support page. So that's a quick overview of how to use analytics in Medius.Re.